Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Faster Masters Rowing Radio, where having a rowing coach only makes you better. Following a program gives you a true pathway to becoming a confident rower who is respected by your peers. You can become the athlete that you want to row with. I'm Rebecca Caroe, and as ever, I am joined by my colleague, Marlene Royle. Hey, Marlene.
Hello, Rebecca, and hello to our listening audience.
It's great to be here again. And before I forget, I want to kick off by showing everyone an absolutely stunning photograph that I have picked for my background this week. Take a look at that. This is from Peter Amuso, and it is the Philadelphia skyline behind him in his single on is it the Schuylkill, the river there?
Yep, that's the Schuylkill, and that is the art museum. And remember in the movie Rocky, where Sylvester Stallone runs up the staircase, that's where he ran up the staircase.
Oh, how funny. Of course I remember him running up the staircase. That was proof that he was getting fitter, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
So to all of our live listeners, welcome. It's really nice to have you along with us. Please share the feed that you are watching right now so that more people know that you are with us. And as ever, if you have questions as we go along, we will try and pick them up if we can. A quick reminder to everybody that we have a donations page for our podcast. It's fastermastersrowing.com/podcast. And you can donate from $1 a month. You can make it a one-off if you donate and then cancel. It is a subscription, though. And we have something which we are in the works of getting out, a little special to thank all of our podcast donors. We are very grateful for you because just as an easy measure, it costs $75 a month just running the server that drives the website. Not to mention all the rest of the stuff. So, there's real costs behind putting this on. And we appreciate every single one of you that shows up to listen, every single one of you who subscribes and downloads every week. And for those of you who donate, you are our special people, very close to our hearts. This past week, it's the part of the show where we talk about the things that Marlene and I do to advocate for masters rowing more broadly. Marlene, do you want to kick off with this?
Sure. Well, this week, we're after U.S. Masters Nationals. And, it's been really nice that I got a very, very nice email this week from Pat Hamner, who is a Masters rower in Dallas. And I'll just read out what he said, because, it was one of those messages that definitely made my day. He said, I think you know that I signed up for Faster Masters. I had a very good regatta at Nationals, and thank you for all the coaching and assistance you have given me over the years. It's really fun. He won a lot of medals, but we especially liked this, that we were the only lightweight G quad in the race, but we beat all but one of the F, E, and D lightweight boats going down the course with us. So it wasn't just a row over. And so 5 rowing events, he came out with a silver and 4 gold medals. Thank you very much. You have an awful lot to do with my rowing progression. And I just wanted to share a big thank you and give credit where credit is due, Pat Hamner. And I thought that was an incredibly nice email. And, when you develop relationships with athletes and you work with them for a long time, and, it really does mean something when people let thank you. And we're as proud of them as we are they are of us, right? So
I kind of visualize that, if you think of the medal as a circle, there's a tiny little slice of that circle that's ours. We're sharing it.
Exactly. I agree. I think coaches should get medals too, actually.
Do you know, it's interesting. Lucerne gives medals to coaches. I have a friend who has a Lucerne medal in the days when the Lucerne regatta was open to clubs to enter, not just international crews. And it's a beautiful big medal in a box. Really,
that's nice. I know. Like, that should be standard. So
I also can share that we have had an article published in Ludum, which is a website which provides software to manage large training squads. And the article is called Managing Your Training in Masters Rowing. It's by Marlene. And it basically runs through all the different things that you need to bear in mind as a masters rower, balance and flexibility in the whole of your life, not just your rowing training, and considerations for your personal program. And it then has a list of questions where you can then assess and set out what matters for you. And then at the end of it, it then provides some suggestions of how to create a framework of regular diary days for training and to have an understanding of what you might be prepared to change in order to facilitate your rowing goals. So, things like splitting out the nice to haves and the essentials in your own rowing training plan. And I'll put the link to that article into our show notes. And thank you to our friends at Ludum for publishing it.
Yes, absolutely.
Big topic this week. We're just coming off the end of August, and it means in the Northern Hemisphere, autumn is on its way, and that's the long distance racing season. It's actually also the long distance racing season in Australia because they have a very big regatta called the Head of the Yarra in November. And I'm figuring that they're probably hoping that their COVID lockdowns will be over by then and they'll be able to run it. So I thought we should do a show that's all about planning your autumn rowing season. What are you going to do and how are you going to do it? And when I say autumn, I actually mean right round through till April next year, when you're probably likely to be doing side-by-side races again. So this is a giant block of training. What are the big picture things in this, Marlene, that we need to think about?
For the autumn season. Yes, for the autumn season. Well, definitely you have to decide what is your most important event, how many events you plan to go to for the racing season, like say now October, November, depending on which country you are in. And I think you want to look at where you need to travel, because weekend travel to races takes a lot more energy, for example, than if you have a race at home or a race that it's just like, you just drive an hour to a nearby club. So I think you want to look at, plan out your events first. That's definitely, and make sure that they're well spaced. I find sometimes people can put 3 weekends of racing together, and that can just end up to be too much racing that you actually aren't getting enough training in during the week. So I think you do want to look at how you space out your season so that you've got weekends when you're not traveling at home where you can just focus on getting enough rest and getting in some good training, as well as weekend training. But it's easy to over race, I think, when you're doing a lot of long distance races. So that is one consideration I would throw out there, to be careful about the spacing leading up to your main event.
So let's start with a calendar. Go to Regatta Central, go to David Bidoff's rowing page if you're in the UK, and look at all of the events that may be coming up. And with regards to choosing your first race, I would reflect on what your big goal is. So if you do have one really big race that you want to do, which, for the sake of argument, the Sculler's Head in London, the Head of the Charles, something that is a seriously peak event, put that one in first. Even if your peak isn't until next year, and that you want to be doing one of the big 8 events, in March, maybe the London Heads or whatever, choose the peak first and then work back from that. And one of the principles of planning and preparing your rowing training so that you achieve what you want to achieve, set yourself, challenges, is to understand that you are training for that big event and that the intermediate events aren't events that you're going to be peaking for. These are just, it's a bit like doing your normal weekend practice rowing, but you're choosing to do it in a race situation. So as Marlene said earlier, picking your first race is going to be important. You probably want to have 2 to 3 weeks of training under your belt in the boats that you're likely to be racing. And I'm reflecting here on some of the local races that I used to do when I lived in Cambridge in the UK. We'd go to Bedford, which is under an hour's drive away. It's a 2K river, so it's a head race course, but they run the event 7 or 8 times during the day. So you can enter lots of different divisions. And right at the end of the day, they then aggregate all of the results and, you know, you find out who won. So the opportunity is there also at places like the Weybridge Silver Skulls event, where you can race several divisions. So the race distance is much shorter than your classic head race. But by doing it several times, there's a fabulous learning opportunity. You can, say, race it in a single, enter it again in a double or a 4 or an 8. So you can, you know, as I said, do it several times. You get to learn the steering. You get to learn pace judgment. Was I warmed up when I started the race? Did I manage to, you know, flatline my splits insofar as you can when you're steering and things like that? And which of the, maybe you do it twice or maybe 3 times, which was the better race for me? Because that familiarity of having done it once and then coming off the water and then turning around and doing it again is really, really beneficial. And you'll have seen that in the summer. Those of you who are following our program know that quite often in Saturdays, we program 2 or sometimes 3 1K pieces through the summer for you to actually practice your racing. Sometimes they're rate capped, but the point is that getting the steering right, getting off the start well, making sure that you get to the start on time and that you're lined up with the other crews, all of these small elements become things that you can then put in your backpack and your mental backpack and say, yes, I'm confident I can do that. And so my recommendation for your first race is something local and something that you can race twice in one day. You might just do it at home. You might just do it in your club and set that up for yourself.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And, you know, I think if another interpretation of choosing your first race is if it is your first time doing a long distance race, then I think it's good to have these types of considerations of choosing something that's relatively low key, easy to go to. Perhaps it's a course that's relatively easy to steer if it's your first time going through the motions of getting ready to do a long distance race. So a course that isn't, or I say in a smaller event, also if you're new to doing long distance races, you know, a race that just doesn't have so many people, like picking the Head of the Charles as your very first race of doing a long distance races could be quite an overwhelming experience. So, you know, picking a race that's lower key, more, you know, no, it's just
do this.
Yeah, don't do that. I mean, there's just too much anxiety provoking things going on. Like pick a race where, like for example, in New England, the Maine Rowing Association has a series of head races all through the summer that are it's very local group, but do good people still, you know, good people come up from Boston. So there's some good competition, but it's a really nice low key way to get used to that kind of racing and get to know people and feel familiar at the course and kind of, you know, get your bearings about you and then progress into perhaps larger races when you build up a little more confident. But that's a nice thing to include at the beginning of your season is, you know, just picking something you can do a couple times. And I just wanted to add, I think the night before the race, you have to get used to the night before the race because this is when you're nervous. You know, this is when you're nervous or excited. You know, if you're nervous, it just means you're excited. And that's something that you don't always experience in a practice. That's why going to a real race is different than a practice. So managing that, thinking about, you know, all those details before you go to bed, what do you have to have ready? You know, what if what if your mind is racing a little bit about what you're going to do, so I think that's an important element of getting ready for those early season races.
Definitely have your own checklist. Personally, on race day, my brain is fried. It's not very good at remembering things. So I have written checklists, things like times when I have to be picking up my number, or, boating for a particular event. So build your own checklist and try it out and see if there was anything you overlooked. Also, loading your boat. Some of you will have a trailer going for the entire club. Some of you will be car topping your cars. How can you do that smoothly and efficiently? Did you need a boat bag? How easy was it to rig your boat when you got to the other end? Bringing your own trestles, slings, with you, or can you car top your car with it fully rigged? Does that matter? So these are all considerations that I'm not going to tell you what to do. You really do need to work it out for yourself. But there are lots of really good resources on our website if you just go and search for head racing. So you've done that first race. Woof.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at spacing between races. So just for the sake of argument, the head of the Charles is at the end of October, which basically means you have around 8 weeks from now. If you're doing the head of the Yarra, it's not until through into November. And I can't, remember where the London Scullers head is. But for ease of reference, 8 weeks to your peak event. Do 3 weeks training, 2 or 3 weeks training, depending on how experienced you are at head racing. 3 weeks if you're less experienced, 2 if you're experienced, before you pick that date of that first race. You then need probably 2 more practices at racing in that 8-week period before your big event, if you can. So that implies that you're going to be racing every second weekend. Now, you might choose to have one of those races at your home water as just a simulacrum that you set up within the club. But as Marlene said, you definitely need to have solid training blocks in the weeks and weekends where you're not under any time pressure and you can spend a lot of time on the water doing the practice, doing the work that you're going to need for the actual peak event. Basically, miles under your belt, I think is what they call. So my recommendation is to try and have a race every 2 to 3 weeks. What's yours, Marlene?
In general, yes, I would say the same thing. Sometimes, again, depending on, let's say if the head of the Charles is the 3rd weekend of October, sometimes we'll see that there might be like an end of September, early weekend October race, like 2 weekends in a row. I think if you're a few weeks out, that's okay if you don't have like a lot of traveling. The week, it's interesting because I find that people react differently. Some people really like to do a race the week before their peak event to kick off the taper. So there is one type of person who definitely likes to do that. It's going to depend a little bit on your recovery ability, what's involved in you getting to your peak event. Do you have enough downtime? Some people prefer to do that last race 2 weeks out. So honestly, I've changed things from time to time depending on the particular person and what kind of works for them psychologically. Some people really want that race just before, and then they just want to, then they go boom, they go down into, they just completely rest and get ready for the next one. Some people feel that that's too close and they don't want that race effort, but you can also race and decide how you're going to race it. Like, you don't have to race every race at the intensity of your peak event. Like, you might decide, I want to race ahead of the Charles at 30. I'm just throwing that out there. You may decide, I want to do this race because I just want to go through all the practice of the race, but I'm going to cap my rate at 28 for this race. And you just decide that that's how you're going to fit it into your program. That's just another alternative where you could if you want the experience of the race, but you don't want to like really blow yourself out, that you can manage the intensity. You can decide what the goal is for that competition. I do think that you want to race in there before your peak race, when you really do try to gauge your speed and really see what you can do, at your best race pace. You just have to plan how much recovery you need. That's going to depend a little bit on your age and your fitness and how much travel is involved in that, etc. Because, travel, if it's an overnight trip, is going to take a bit more energy than if you can make a day trip or do your trials at home. So
absolutely. One of the things that when I came to do the Head of the Charles, it's always a long journey because we're flying into the country. And so I've done it a couple of different ways. I've done it to fly in on the Thursday and then race on Saturday. And I've done it where we've flown in 10 days ahead, had the weekend prior training actually somewhere different, then travel across country. So that was West Coast training, 3 days there, then travel to the East Coast, 3 days training on the East Coast, and then race. So you need to work out what works with your own, time availability as well. And personally, I like to be able to practice on the course the day before for a really big event like that, if possible, because there's always some elements that you've forgotten, even if you've done the course before. And so just having a paddle over the course is really, really beneficial.
Yes, I agree. And actually, for people coming into an event like the Head of the Charles, or perhaps the Head of the Yarrow, which is a really large event, and you have to travel quite a distance. I mean, I always try to encourage people, if you can take the time and come earlier in the week before if you've got the available time off from work, that you can come in, you have your travel day, you get rested, you've got to say 2 days on the course before all the crowds start arriving. You really, really have time to look around, to row the course, to kind of own the course. And then you can stay off the course when it's really busy, because in an event like that, if you're in a small boat, you're dealing with everybody in every size boat, quads, doubles, eights. So there's a lot of traffic, and there are a lot of things to manage of all different boat sizes. But, if you have the luxury to do that, I 100% think it's worth it, because you're rested, and then you can chill the day before when the course is really busy, if possible. So
that's very true. And just as a little sales pitch, if you want to learn how to keep your boat level when you go around corners, that is one of the topics that we will be covering in our subscription program starting on the 1st of September. Now, before we finish on this topic, I want to dive into a bit of the physiology of peaking. Everyone talks about a peak event. So you can obviously see that, the most important race of the year is the peak event. But when you write a training program, Marlene, and I think most of our listeners know that it's you that writes the training programs, how does peaking actually work physiologically?
Well, the main reason for peaking is so that you're completely rested, so that you get kind of, we call it super compensation. So you've done a lot of training. When you're doing a lot of training for a long time, your body accumulates fatigue. You're getting fit, but you're also carrying a certain amount of fatigue all the time, and you're using muscles. So this is in a simple version, but your muscles are using glycogen, and your glycogen is always a little bit depleted all the time when you're doing a lot of training. So your peak event is going to be your main event that you want to be 100% recovered for. You want to be 100% mentally ready for, and 100% physiologically recovered and ready for as much as you possibly can. So when you start your taper, the taper period is when you reduce the volume of training, and you maintain a similar frequency. So for example, if you're used to training six days a week, 1 time a day, you continue that pattern, but the length and the duration of your sessions starts to decrease. And you decrease that kind of over certain percentages over time, so that your muscles start to recover, and that you as you're eating good nutritious food, you start to replace all that muscle glycogen. So if you've been training pretty heavily, it can take about 10 days for that muscle glycogen to recover. And one thing I do observe is that often masters who do not follow a strong taper often work way too hard up to the day of the race, and they're just not fully recovered when they get to race day. So basically you want to be in a stage that you're really chomping at the bit and you are ready to go. Now, some people love tapers because they love the decrease in the work. Some people hate tapers. They are people who are high strung, like workaholic types, worried that they're going to lose fitness. You will not lose fitness. You really have to stop training for really quite a while to seriously start to lose fitness. You're decreasing your training to allow the muscle glycogen, to allow your mind to be clear. And really you have to obey it. I mean, it's to your benefit to obey it. If you go and you cheat and you do a whole bunch more work than you're supposed to, you're not going to be in that readiness state on race day. And it's sometimes it's hard for people to relax during that period, but you have to do it. I'd like to see people go to the line and they just can't wait to dig their blades in the water and go. They want to be, you want to be ready to race hard. And and you've got to let your body recover. And to tolerate pain, you must be rested. You have to be mentally rested to be prepared to deal with the discomfort that you're going to experience.
That is a really interesting insight. So tolerating pain is something that we learn as part of our training. So for example, yesterday I was doing 5 lots of 9 minutes, and trust me, the 5th one was a mental stress, as well as the 4th one was a bit of a physical stress, but the 5th one really knocked it in and made it really intense. So mental resting so you train yourself to tolerate pain, but that's not what you're just describing here, is it?
Mm-hmm.
I think we've lost Marlene briefly. I'll try and get the internet connection back. So for myself, tolerating pain is something that really genuinely only comes with practice. And it's all about training your body to understand the intensity with which you need to apply to every single stroke. So intensity is something that you can train your body into. So every time you're rowing, even if you're doing low rate endurance, how can you make the power phase of the rowing stroke really firm and intense, and the recovery phase really loose and relaxed? And if you think about it, it's a little bit, if you take your fist and just really clench it up so it's super tight, and then release it so that your fingers just drop down and your wrist droops as well, and then clench it and then release it. And the more you can do the relaxation, the longer you can do that repetitive clenching and releasing. And that training intensity in your regular practice is really useful. But for the racing, what Marlene's talking about, about tolerating pain, you must be mentally rested. That's a slightly different thing, isn't it?
Oh, I was just breaking up, so I couldn't hear that last comment.
That's okay. I think we covered it. So given that the internet's not playing ball at the moment, I think we'll bring the episode to a close. Sorry that became a little bit glitchy right at the end there. So this has been Faster Masters Rowing Radio, the show dedicated to masters athletes who want fun, fitness, confidence in their rowing. You can become a student of the sport by buying a Faster Masters program subscription today at fastermastersrowing.com, or please share this with your friends. We hope that what we talk about is beneficial and helpful to you in your practice, and that together we're all going to enjoy the sport more. Till next time, bye-bye.